around a little bit, and then we'll get into the textures. This group 1 at the top is all of those kind of CAD line work layers that came in when I exported it from Illustrator. So when I turn those off, I should see a lot of my line work go away. My computer's really slow, so it did that very slowly. And we're happy about that. I don't care about that today, so I'm not going to worry about it. Now, if I try to select this, one of the things you'll see really quick, I guess it selected everything, but I do have in this, you'll want to see there's there's 2 layers that are called filtered layers. You'll want to find those and make sure that they're turned off because they are full sort of images that cover everything. And I accidentally kept turning them on, and then you're selecting them, you're turning something off, you're like, why didn't that disappear? It's because, oh, there's this kind of filtered effect one on top. And these filters I use a variety of different techniques that we'll do a bit of a review over. But it's just as, oftentimes I will save out a flattened version of everything and then go into the filter graphics and use a number of those to do an overlay on everything, which is a great technique. But make sure that those are turned off. And then click in here and see if anything else needs to be turned off. I don't think so. I twirl everything down so I can just sort of see my base layers. Walk through those. So from top, what's that?
From that tree and it's in a group, is that an issue for you, or how do you? Because whenever I pick a tree and it's in a group, it's like, nope.
Say that again.
You have to take them out of the group and move the stuff around. Yeah, where is that?
Which tree?
Like you had a group of trees.
I had a group of trees.
It's like an entire group of something. Is that if you're honest?
If I'm in what? I'm not understanding, sorry.
Oh, I think if you have auto select.
Oh, yeah, that's an important note. I'm sorry. I am an auto select show transform control guy. So I always have auto select turned on.
Yeah, but if you click on if you want one tree out of a group of trees, it will always just select the whole group and not the single tree.
Oh.
Auto select.
Yeah. Huh. I don't think I have that issue.
Sorry.
See, I just selected that one tree.
You get that BP
That's in a group.
I have that.
I just clicked on that tree.
And then try to move it.
Well, that didn't move because I need to zoom in.
The only reason I'm asking is because you look super organized, and when I try to get them organized, I can't select one thing, so I have to keep them all separate, not in a group. So I just want to be more organized.
Sure. Sorry, my computer, this is why I want to be in the computer lab, because my computer really is bad. So, as I select that, I can just move it. I just move it over. Does anybody else have that issue? You can't just select a tree and move it?
Well, we have Creative Cloud. Do you? That's it. Creative Cloud?
I have Creative Cloud, and I've never had this issue. So, but all it is in a folder. This isn't in a subfolder. Well, are you auto-selecting the layer or the group?
Oh.
That would be a good thing. That brings up something else just randomly I learned from students last year that was brilliant, which is when you use the magic wand, sometimes you can sample all layers. Have you seen that before? That's pretty cool. Because before with the magic wand, if I took the magic wand, I'd have to find the one layer that I wanted to sample from. And I'd go, magic wand, well, it's only going to sample that one tree that was the layer I had selected. So if you go sample all layers, then I sample up there, it's going to sample the entire image. That's particularly handy when you're working with line work from CAD, because you've got lots of different layers over itself, and you're wanting to make quick selections and use masks. And so I was like, this is the greatest thing ever.
The eyedropper and the phone stand and everything else. What you're going for.
Yeah. What's that? It does? Or
Well, like you can choose whether you select, I think the eyedropper,
Yeah.
or at least like the clone stamp. So if you know you like how it looks, but it's like a million layers stacked up, then you don't have to do
you can clone stamp all layers?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, that's great. See, I didn't know that. So that's like clone stamp,
So like up at the top where it says current layer,
current
to
layer.
the right,
And does it clone stamp them into the
Oh.
appropriate layers? Or
No,
does it
just the one you're trying.
it just
Just the one you're drawing on.
That's it.
Very interesting. I like that. See, learning stuff all the time. So yeah. So if anybody sees me using this, and I'm using, because like I said, I use show transform. Raise of hands. Who does auto select? It's like so amazing. Yeah, it's usually like half and half, if not more. I think there's less auto select people in my experience. So that's okay. Has anybody ever gone into a Photoshop file and there's like a color, and there's like weird colors on everything? Did you know you can?
Sort of like using your director?
Yeah, you could actually just give these a color. Where is it? Usually it just pops up. Layer properties. If just from an organizational standpoint, you can always say like that's if you want to make all your people highlighted as orange. I went into like at TLS, I was like into these Photoshop files. I'm like, why are these orange? And like other ones are yellow. And it's like all the textures were yellow and people were orange. And it's another organizational technique. I also one thing you'll see in here now, like of course. Oh God, I hate my computer. Sorry, it's like it's so angry at me. You'll see me use not only a ton of masks, which we'll be going over, but adjustment layers that are just twirled down to only affect the layer below them. And so that they're non-destructive. So in this case, I would add a brightness and contrast mask and then use this little guy. In CC and CS6, it looks different. It's far more intuitive as a layer. And that just says only affect the layer below you. So I can just affect that.
Is there a way to essentially like nullify or cancel out adjust the layer or something when you want to turn on the brightness, but only for
Yeah.
4 layers underneath?
Oh, for 4 layers
Or
underneath?
something.
Yeah.
Well, you'd
you
use a
can
group.
control-
Yeah.
You can create it. You want to group those 4 layers and then apply that mask to do that. But the other thing is that each layer mask has a mask, or every layer adjustment has a mask. So if I want to use that mask, I can turn off the brightness and contrast in certain areas.
Yeah, so you just click the layer mask and then you hit Option, click, 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 and then you just sub them underneath the mask and it gives them all that so you don't have to do them. It just gives them all of them.
I don't know if they have that in CS5. Where is it at?
So you hit Option and then your mouse.
Where do I hit option?
Your,
right up here?
And then,
Up there?
no. And then just move your mouse by where the layer thing is and then hit Option and then click. So not on the layer mask, but on the entire layer itself, like over to your right,
My right?
your left.
My left?
And you're holding down Alt.
Okay.
Option. Okay. Move your mouse down a little.
To be like on the border between.
The border.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah. So there you go. And then so you can just keep doing that. And if you have a filter on top of that, or a layer or anything, you could make it so it's only associated with whatever's on top of that. So if you wanted to filter just 4 layers, like Aaron's saying, you can clump them all together and call it that.
Slick. That's great. And so the greatest thing about that is it's non-destructive. You can always kind of return back to it. You don't have to worry about it. You can copy and paste whatever effects you've used to another vegetation so that they look of a similar vein. So let's just walk through some of these layers. We've got our parking. It's really mundane. I accidentally moved that, I think, looks like, in all of my messing around. There's more parking. I've got a filter on there. If you twirl down the filter, That is just a hue, saturation, and a brightness and contrast that does apply to everything. Oftentimes I'll actually have textures on there. Site copy. So these are some things that I didn't use, like topo. You can barely sort of see that pop up. But it's great that they're there because if I wanted to do, say I wanted to use layer comps and I wanted to do some more diagrammatic things, then I wouldn't have to go back to Illustrator. I could just use them all in here. Moving down, we've got aggregate, which is just being reflected down here. That's done. I'll show you one of the tricks that I do all the time. So if everybody, if you right click, you can duplicate layer. Just so you know, I duplicate layers a lot, so I have a hotkey, and because I like to duplicate them to new. So just so everybody knows, if you ever want to add a keyboard change, you go to keyboard shortcuts under edit, and I want to duplicate layer, which should be under layers, duplicate layer or group, and I create something that I call Shift Command D. And so that's not standard in Photoshop. I have my own sort of layers. And so I go Shift Command D, pulls me up my dialog, I say new, okay, opens up my aggregate. Now it's already masked, so I can delete my layer mask to see everything. I'm going to turn my opacity up so I can see that. So aggregate's one of those things that I actually render a lot. And this one, I think I've already done some of the tricks to, maybe not. But it's when you're working at a bird's eye or a plan level, you need some consistency. There's less. It's less about the texture maybe as the uniformity of it or sort of the scale or nature of it. And so first of all, with textures, you always want to be working in 2D. But so just with this one, to add a little bit of extra oomph to it, one of the best things to do is go filter and then pixelate. You can try a lot of these different ones. I guess oftentimes I'll do mezzatone, and it gives me sort of a randomized pattern of dots. So I'm going to say fine dots, okay, cool. I'm going to undo that really quick and just duplicate my layer so I have an option here. Filter, pixelate, mezzatone, okay. And oftentimes what I do is I can change the opacity on this. I can turn it to screen so that all the black or the white goes away. And it gives me an extra layer for adjusting this sort of textural element to that. And it allows me to actually start to read aggregate a little bit better. I can mess with this a lot more by changing the settings in the blending modes. You can see how sometimes this one's in black and white, but if you use if you have a flower pattern, we'll go over that in a little bit. I don't want to get ahead of myself too much. But so that texture is used over here. Is everything turned up? No. I recommend everybody to go to this group 3 and turn it all the way up because I had everything blocked down. But you can see how that aggregate is being shown there. And it's just masked away. There it is again on this boardwalk. So there's 2 layers of that. Why are there 2 layers? I don't even know. There's another aggregate layer somewhere down within the planting beds. So I'm going to turn those off. So these planting beds, let's duplicate that layer off to see what's going on with them. This time I'm just going to actually duplicate the entire group. Duplicate the group. Say new. Okay. Let's check out what we've got going on here. So one of the quick ways to turn a mask on and off, if anybody doesn't know already, is hold the shift and then click on the mask. It just turns the mask off. So I can quickly run through all of my textures and see what is happening. So I've got this kind of weird thing going on that has a bunch of huge saturation and other layers going on. So let's pull this off to the side and see what it looks like. Okay, So that is actually something that was just put over top to provide an extra level of diversity. We go back, see what those layers were again. Oftentimes I'll use a blend mode on top of those as well. So if you go to these grasses, for instance, down here, this is like a grass tuft guy. That should, well, in context, it'll be something different. So pull these all apart and see all the different things. So creating just a palette of these to work with is really, really important. And the best way to do that, because you do want them to always be 2D graphics, is to figure out how to make textures. So if you open up the grass tufts in the support folder, I'm going to show you really quick how to make a seamless 2D texture. So it'll be really handy in modeling in particular, because you need seamless textures to add to your Rhino and SketchUp models. So first and foremost, you need to get a pixel size that you're kind of familiar with. So and edges that are filled up. So I could do a number of things that fill in this. One of the kind of more trendy ones I feel like these days is I would magic wand everything and then go fill and use the edit fill content aware. Does everyone know content aware? Yeah, it's great for skies. It's okay for this, but not really the best. Overall, I would almost always use the clone stamp, hit the letter S, get my clone stamp, might fill up these edges. You want to be careful when you're doing vegetation, using the clone stamp with regards to which brush you use. If you use something that's like a feathered edge, it seems like it makes a lot of sense because I can select this and I kind of go down here. But what ends up happening when you zoom in is those edges get really muddy. And so while this seems like it's a little bit harsh up here, you do want to be more nuanced and change it up. But as you are clone stamping more and more and more, because you might take this texture, add it somewhere else, and then clone stamp it somewhere else, and then clone stamp it again. And if you keep using these kind of soft edged brushes, it just makes it muddy and gross, and you can't fix it later. This edge you can fix later. So anyway, walk back just a little bit, because I don't really care. In this case, I'm just going to crop the entire image down to something that's valuable. So this image, by the way, of course, was created with a clone stamp. I just started with a grass texture and clone stamped the heck of it out of it all over the place. So I cropped my image down to something that only has information of value. And I want to figure out how big this is. So I go up to my image size. I'm going to actually go to points, which seems weird, but in this case, because I want to plug in a number, it's easier for me to use points. So I'm going to turn off the sort of relationship between these two. I should be able to. The lock. Oh, never mind. Okay. Well, anyway, my image size is about 1,200 points wide and 850 the other way. So I don't know why I can't turn my lock off. Where does that say? Oh, there. It's weird most programs you can click the lock and it just turns it off. Sorry. So I'm going to just type 1,200 and 850 in there because they're numbers that I'm even going to do 800 just because they're numbers I can remember, and you'll know why in a second. So 1,200 by 800. And now that I know that my image is exactly 1,200 by 800, I'm going to use filter. I have to select my layer first. Because when I was going to filter, if I don't have a layer selected, it doesn't know what to filter. Filter, other, offset, and in your later versions, I think it will give you a preview of this, which is much nicer, or a nicer dialog box anyway. But in this case, we know that our image is 1,200 by 800, so I can offset it by 600 in one direction and 400 in the other direction. And now what I've essentially done is completely offset it. So this was the center, those four combined points. And so I can go through and clean up all the other joints, again, with my clone stamp. So I hit the letter S for my clone stamp. I have to select a layer so it knows what to stamp. I'm using a hard-edged brush. In this case, you could definitely, get crazy and use some other brushes if you wanted to, but you do risk muddying up the image. So I'm going to go through. I always adjust my brush size with the bracket bars. If anybody doesn't know that, that's very, 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 very handy. Drag it in. I'm holding the Alt option to make selections that I'm masking from. Just trying to make something that's a little bit unique. That's bad. But the point is to blur that line the same way that the rest of the image is nicely blurred. And you do want to avoid sort of spots like this because they will start to read in a messy way. So whatever, I'm happy with the overall look. I'm not really happy, but that's okay. Of this. So go back, filter, other, offset. Hopefully it remembered my things. I hit OK. It just flipped it back to where those other corners were the center. And does it look okay? Good. The only reason this would look bad is if I accidentally clone stamped sort of along the edges and kind of messed it up a little bit. So I'll go back a step. And for instance, I'm going to clone stamp up here on these edges. Those are the points where they interact. Filter, other, offset, okay. Now you can tell it's a little bit off because I messed with those edges. Clean it up, a little bit better. Filter, other, offset. Cool, looks good. So seemingly now this is a seamless texture. So we could use this in Rhino, we could use this in SketchUp, it'd be great. Depending on the scale of it, it's going to potentially be messy. But these textures, more or less, were probably actually created just by clone stamping because it was faster. But it's very important to know how to do seamless textures. And then if you want to make a giant palette of this, what I would do is copy and paste, or I'm sorry, duplicate that layer back over to my untitled sort of page that's all about textures. Shrink it to a nice scale. Hit return, and then snap that to there. Select both, duplicate, snap it, do a little bit more, and end up with a texture that is very large and in charge. I love it when people laugh at my jokes. I really appreciate it. So don't be embarrassed. They're really funny. See? So while it's not perfect texture, really the only thing you're reading is the iterations within the texture. The actual edges should be perfectly seamless. They are aligning. So, okay, so back to the plan.
Could you talk
Yes.
about why you mask instead of pasting into?
Pasting into, yes.
Like just having the area doing.
Yeah. So in this case, where I want to use my giant grass tufts thing, I'm just going to merge all these down. And now I'll duplicate that back. I send it back to my original file. I go in here, and I have this big grass thing. So I have, generally speaking, a lot of the times with these, I'll have like a base graphic that has the entire page covered with textures. And the reason that's great is then I can go through here, and if I'm down to my line work, such that I can use, let's just turn off a bunch of these layers. So I can actually see sort of the base information. I can take my magic wand and select that area, and go back to my large texture and just create a mask so that so if I wanted to now say up here, on this area, I want to add some of that grass texture. I can go over to my mask, get my brush. I think it was covering it. I'm not positive if it went that far down. But I can paint white. Oh, it's probably underneath of something. So I'm just going to bring it up a little bit higher. Paint white. Whoops. I have to make sure I'm on the mask. I can paint wherever I want. I can add it to it. And the way that I use that a lot of the times is not only just for the texture, but in the case of something like right up down here, I hope I didn't turn it all off.
So
No, I didn't.
pasting into is destructive, right? This is non-destructive.
Yeah, this is non-destructive. And so
But
you
it's
can...
larger, right? It takes up,
Oh,
no? Like it wouldn't slow it down. Like if you have more layer masks and filters and...
oh, the masks don't take up any extra energy. No, not at all. The actual mask itself.
No, but like if you paste into, you're only pasting into this little amount.
Oh, yeah. I mean, technically, yes.
Takes
But
this huge texture, because you said it's by the volume. Of the
yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, so you are using up computer space. That's why this file got so darn big, is because I had so many textures in here. But get a better computer, or figure out your computer, because that should not be the determining factor. It's a better practice to do it this way. So,
Could you also tell us, real quick, going back a step, what the offset and filter actually did? I didn't quite figure out.
oh, sure, I can just
What-
draw it while we're here. So all it is it's taking, yeah, I don't care about this. It's taking the center point, because we knew the exact size of it, and we offset it exactly half of that. I won't do it as smaller pieces, but it's taking it from being like this to being like, yeah, I do have to tear them off, to being, get this right, to moving this one, moving the center points all to the opposite corners. So this one down here, this one right here,
So you don't have to try that.
this one right here, and this one right here. Because then, when I stack it, they will align perfectly. So if I duplicate this guy over here, then this edge will perfectly match. It's a mirror version of what it was already looking at. Okay? And so that's why then when we clean up the inside and we re-offset, it's always a perfect match. Those edges are always kind of like adding up to each other. So this guy would be, in a way, then adding to itself, actually. We're going to start that. No problem.
So have you ever used layer styles for this instead of this?
Layer styles.
Yeah.
In Photoshop? What is a layer style?
So layer style, if you go, so open up a new layer into your blending options. So you've got, sorry, pull up like the dialog box.
Oh, yeah. Oh, those guys. Yeah, I'll use some layer
You can
styles.
go in here and you can take your grass pattern from the other file.
Oh, yeah.
Just define it as a pattern.
Mhm.
And
Which
then-
is good.
And then apply it into your CAD using the same thing, and then you don't have all that extra stuff.
It's very
So
true.
then you can take all that stuff, put whatever effects on it you want, and then if you have another file, you can go in here on your menu bar.
Mhm.
You can select. You can do copy layer style.
Uh-huh.
And so then you can take it to your another file and it'll do everything that you've done there exactly the same.
Which is totally awesome, especially for plan graphics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For like,
Um,
vendors that want to do it, but for plans, it's like. You
Oh,
can
it's-
do a whole plan
it's
in
brilliant.
minutes.
Yeah. Actually, I was just thinking about doing that the other day. Is adding a lot of the textures to because you have patterns. Photoshop has a bunch of ugly patterns,
Yeah.
and like weird globular ones and stuff. The reason I don't is because, as I was saying before, I do like I try to use the most minimal number of tools as possible. Because this same technique I'll use in bird's eyes, because then I'll be able to warp the textures a little bit. I'll actually get in and do a little bit more nuancing. And in the instances where those iterations become bad, such that you actually start to read the grid, I can actually go in and clone stamp and kind of touch things up and make them look better. But yeah, they're hugely valuable as long as those things aren't sort of getting in the way. Something like a paving pattern would be perfect example of that. You can scale them. You can scale within those patterns, the size of those. It's really valuable. I mean, but to the same effect, like if I was to scale a paving pattern, I'd probably have a reference scale on there, and I'd want to like look exactly at it and scale it instead of on like by hand. So one other quick note about these textures, I just wanted to show that, so in this instance where that grass pattern has been masked away and it's only on the front, if you note here, I have it on linear light. And so the way I used this pattern was by actually just kind of giving it some depth, because underneath of it is like a huge grass texture. Is there a hand back there? So that was underneath of everything. So what that essentially ends up doing is providing me a basis of green for the entire drawing that compositionally ties everything together, and then I can use these extra textures to just add sort of intrigue. In the case of this, it also has a hue saturation level that changes it to look more like a prairie grass of sorts. Okay, there's one or two more things I just wanted to really note while we're still working in here. Not only the layer management, but you guys can jump into this and sort of see a lot of the things, and you'll see a lot of masks, obviously. I've provided, there are a number of different textures. There's a big blue stem texture in here, Liriope. There's like patchwork flowers. That's like some of those like random textures. But the one I really love is this one, the tree canopy. I think, was this in your folder? Okay, good. Okay, so all this guy is, I'm going to duplicate this back over to my plan drawing. Ooh, and I'm clicking too fast. Makes my computer very angry. It's really big. All I want to do is center it over top of everything. It's huge, way too big. Okay, hit enter. I'm going to turn it off really quick and turn off. I'm going to try to find, my trees. I'm going to turn off my trees layer because, although now I probably can't find. Oh, there it is. Put it into the trees layer. Okay, so I'm going to turn my trees off and just have this texture. For the sake of this experiment, I'm going to move it all the way to the top just so I can see it and turn it on normal. So obviously it looks like that. But where this comes in handy is what I'll do is I can set a blending mode now, but because eventually we're going to turn on overlay and just try to get the texture of the trees and maybe duplicate it and get another one. And you can see what I did when you search through the files. But I'm going to add a layer mask and then use the paint bucket, hit G, hit X to get black, and then paint it all away. Okay? And now, for the sake of figuring out where those trees were, I'm going to go back down here and just turn on. Well, actually, I don't care. I'm going to guess at where those trees are. And I'm going to go and I'm going to give myself a brush. And I'm going to choose
Tree brush?
a tree brush, sure. Why not? Not really. I mean, I don't think I have any good tree brushes, but like here's a goofy bush. Yeah, shrub. I hate how like my Photoshop doesn't adjust until I hit enter on these things. So I'm going to switch my brush over to be white. So I'm painting. And I can start to add some interest. So you can see how, in particular, when you have, you can change your opacity on your brush. So you're just kind of giving it a little bit. But if you actually have some like plan trees in there that are really distinctive and part of your design, the good thing about that is that you can go through and I'm going to turn my, these are street trees, trees bridge. That's a shadow layer. Okay, so what I can do with this now is actually then go back to my brush and kind of highlight over top of these more designed trees And I can turn my opacity up so I'm getting a little bit more action. But what it really successfully does is makes them look a little different. You know, now I can go to my blending mode, turn on lighten, or I can turn on hard light. You know, just play with the blending modes. Overlay is probably good. And it's very quickly just sort of modulated the overall look at that. And when it's in a plan rendering, that's going to be really important. Because although it seems like not that big of a difference, it really does make a significant amount from an artistic standpoint. Just kind of, all I'm doing is drawing on top of those. And immediately it's creating some delineation. It works really well for the grasses, but the trees as well. I use this technique on all trees for bird's eyes and everything. Your generalized trees. Everybody knows they've seen those renderings that are like 20 of the same trees in a row. If you do the same thing and then all of a sudden you went and you actually did a little bit of this sort of painterly technique over top of it, mess with the blending modes, you can really find some interesting things. So.
When are we going to learn about bird's eyes? That's the one thing that I've never actually been to be successful.
After we do some modeling. So what was everybody's availability for the modeling next week? Is that still? Are we still to go? Okay, so that's from 9 o'clock. So what we'll do next Friday is we will do some composition and Photoshop rendering, so we can get into the importance of modeling and how to, essentially thinking about what you want to get out of the model to create a rendering before we actually start doing the modeling, so that at least we kind of see the before and the after. See the after before we do the before. And then we'll do the Rhino all day Saturday from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. There will be an hour lunch break. And then I'll follow that up probably with another Rhino tutorial the following Friday. This Saturday will be focused primarily on that project I showed, the John Street rooftop, because it is flat. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, oh, I need topo, I need this and that. But you really do need to understand how to model and use construction planes and use your line work before you can ever start dreaming of using projecting onto topo. Because the way you end up doing everything with topo is that you have everything flat, and you build your topo, and then you project onto it. Okay? So you just always design in 2D, but you're always projecting onto it. I mean, then once you have some things up there, of course, you can modify them, but it's way easier to always think procedurally in 2 different dimensions. And that includes section. So like when we do the other drawings, I'll draw a section in CAD, and then add that to the other ones, and then I know exactly what to be extruding in different directions. So. Anybody